Good morning. Good morning. This is a great day for everyone that have joined us in this very, very important press conference, very necessary press conference. We have a few housekeeping rules that we just want to go over with everyone. Thank you so very much, and you're welcome to join us today. The housekeeping rules is just to let you know that we're going to have a Q&A, and you're welcome to put any questions or concerns or comments that you may have in our chat. You can also raise your hand by using the raise hand symbol that's on the bottom of your screen. And so again, thank you so very much. Is there any other things that they need to know, Dr. Zena, about the housekeeping rules?
No, yeah, you mentioned Q&A, and then they can also, any questions or comments they can share through chat. I think you mentioned that, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
You know, we really want everyone to know that take the time out, you know, to share this press conference. You know, you can copy the link, and you know, we're going to have some information in the chat that you can copy and share with your loved ones, your friends, your family, everyone you know. So we really appreciate you and thank you so very much for coming to the press conference today. But we're going to jump right in and go ahead and let everyone know, the whole world know what this is really all about. You know, and then I want to wrap it up with where are we at now, you know, and what are some of the things that people can do to help us in this endeavor. Thank you.
Okay, well, Ms. Belinda, we've put the word out, you know, preceding this press conference. This is following our international press release announcing the complaint that you and I filed on behalf of Reverend Errol Victor Sr. So hopefully our audience is generally aware of Reverend Victor's circumstances. He is a candidate for Congress in the 5th Congressional District there in Louisiana. And we submitted, Ms. Belinda and I am Dr. Zena Crenshaw Logo. I am Assistant Chief of Operations for Louisiana United International. And for you all, for those of you who don't know, Reverend Errol Victor Sr. is a longtime LUI member. And we're going to talk, you know, about his circumstances. And it began with a family tragedy back in 2008, believe it or not, the death of Reverend Victor's stepson, who was only 8 years old at the time, M.L. Lloyd III. And we're going to we're not going to begin with the facts. Ms. Belinda is the best witness. She's been there. She witnessed everything that happened. I'm going to focus, if you prefer, Ms. Belinda, on our complaint to the UN Special Rapporteur, if that's where you want us to begin.
Absolutely, that's where we want to begin, because that's what the people really need to know, what this press conference is about, how important it is that we get help for him. I'm very concerned at this moment in time that his life is in danger.
Okay, I need to share a little background information for us to really understand the political and historical significance of our complaint that we submitted on Reverend Victor's behalf. And then we'll focus afterwards, you know, throughout the press conference, on his particular circumstances and the fact that he is literally at risk of death while in the custody of the state of Louisiana. And he's from our last reports, he was symptomatic of classic COVID-19 symptoms. And of course, many of you all know about the impact and the the impact of COVID-19 on incarcerated populations across the country. I believe incarcerated individuals are being affected by that potentially deadly virus more than 5 times the rate of people who are, in the a civilian community, those of us who are not incarcerated. So the risk that's presented is of Reverend Victor uh, dying, literally dying from that disease uh, due to intentional neglect on the part of the people who have him in custody, the officials of certain officials of the state of Louisiana, or perhaps some other um, foul play. And as we talk about his circumstances, it'll become more apparent why we've made those very serious allegations. But as I indicated, I want to really emphasize the political and historical significance of the complaint that Ms. Belinda and I filed last Thursday. On Reverend Victor's behalf. It was submitted to Geneva, Switzerland, to the Office of the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture. So let me talk a bit about that representative, that particular official that's part of the UN's human rights enforcement mechanisms. UN, the United Nations Special Rapporteurs, they have limited mandates. They're not judges. They're not criminal law enforcers. They're more like watchdogs, and they may advocate, or perhaps it's better to say that they may simply express their expertise within the assigned areas of focus. Professor Niles Meltzer is the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, and it's to him that we submitted our complaint about Reverend Victor's circumstances. And when you think about torture, we need to understand that what may be appropriate government action for some people or some categories of people could be torture for others. So for example, what may be appropriate punishment for, let's say, someone who has been convicted of committing a crime, that if you are a clearly innocent person and you find yourself being prosecuted and maybe even convicted, wrongfully convicted, and this is all attributed to just simply being bullied or harassed by government official, no matter where you are in the world, certainly being in that predicament when you're clearly innocent is can constitute both physical and psychological torture. And then there's certain government conduct that's considered torture no matter who's involved. The United States has been called out, you may recall, about some of its interrogation techniques. Everyone remembers hearing about waterboarding, and that was considered across the world as torture. And the United States has since had periods where they disclaim, are retreated from that technique, and then other times when they more embraced it. But generally, that is taboo at this point. And then also, there are many in the international human rights community who consider solitary confinement, particularly for any extended period of time, they consider that to be torture. Well, as I indicate, if you're innocent and you find yourself being prosecuted for a crime, you're clearly innocent, then just being part of that process can easily be considered physical torture. You're confined, you're shackled, and you're it can be a very mentally debilitating situation. So that can be psychological torture. And of course, Miss Melinda and I are presenting Reverend Victor in that light as a person who's actually innocent of any type of criminal activity, and especially the heinous crime that he's been charged with, being held accused of being responsible for the death of his at the time 8-year-old stepson. But first and foremost, Miss Belinda and I have asked Professor Meltzer, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, first and foremost, we've asked him to consider Reverend Victor a political prisoner. Now, I imagine that America's official position is probably that there is no such thing as a U.S. political prisoner. I mean, we're supposedly a free country, so the idea of political prisoner, there's a variety of definitions, but it's basically the idea of someone being incarcerated, criminally prosecuted and incarcerated because of their ideas or who they are. Or perhaps they're critical of U.S. government. So officially, the United States is going to take the position that most likely that, we don't have political prisoners. We don't prosecute, we don't jail people because of their ideas or who they are simply because they speak out and are critical of the government. So, it is both a very real tragedy and a groundbreaking opportunity that we have evidence that justify even hinting, even suggesting, even in any way asking whether an American citizen, is a political prisoner of the United States. That is the historical significance of that, because you don't have that opportunity, and it's a very important question to ask, particularly if you're people like Ms. Melinda Parker Brown, co-founder and CEO of Louisiana United International, and myself. We've been social justice advocates for decades at this time. So, we have reason to believe that, in fact, there are many political prisoners, U.S. political prisoners, but to be able to have the evidence that justifies officially presenting that question to the United Nations Special Rapporteur. Again, it's a tragedy that anyone would have circumstances that would justify this complaint that we file, but it also presents an opportunity that may not otherwise be presented to people who believe that they have been incarcerated. They are a target simply because of their thoughts and perhaps their criticism of U.S. government, or just simply who they are. And why would that be a rare opportunity? You have to understand that a special rapporteur doesn't simply second guess the U.S. legal system. And it's especially not about whether an alleged criminal is guilty or innocent. So we can't just go to the UN and say, hey, this is a person we believe is innocent. And it's torture. It's a violation of their rights for them to be criminally prosecuted. It wouldn't be appropriate for Miss Belinda and I to make our complaint all about the evidence that Reverend Victor was maliciously prosecuted. Instead, what we've done is propose that he was maliciously prosecuted for reasons that should qualify him to be considered a political prisoner, and his innocence just simply strengthens that conclusion. So I'm gonna just make this two points, and then I'll open it our discussion back up to Ms. Belinda Parker Brown, and we've had now Mr. J.L. Lazoo has joined us, who is the campaign spokesperson for Reverend Errol Victor as a candidate, a fully qualified candidate for Congress. But what I want to emphasize now is if we start from the premise that Reverend Victor was maliciously prosecuted, and then what has happened to him in the process is easily considered torture. And again, there are documents out there's 11-page complaint that we have submitted to the UN Special Rapporteur. So I don't want to just simply rehash the facts. I want to share with them to the extent that there's any questions about the specifics of Reverend Victor's circumstances. So please feel free to pose your questions in the chat box or through Q&A, or when we open up our press conference for questions, raise your hand. But if we start from the premise that Reverend Victor was maliciously prosecuted, that he was targeted, that his rather powerful business rivals in the public sector and the private sector, that they targeted him as a way to remove him from local economic development that Ms. Belinda can talk about in much more detail, and that what we're having now is an effort to cover up that scheme by repeatedly trying and twice failing to successfully prosecute Reverend Victor. It's our contention, and what we've proposed to Professor Melzer, the UN Special Rapporteur, is that that qualifies Reverend Victor as a political prisoner. And then that gives us an opportunity to look at everything that's happened to him in terms of whether it constitutes torture. Our complaint identifies at least 11 incidents spanning from 2008 until to this very day. 11 incidents of torture, some of which have a clear beginning and an end, and others of which some incidents began at different points and they're still happening to this day. And Ms. Belinda can update on us on that. I'll share that Reverend Victor, as last we heard, he is in prison. He has been incarcerated for nearly 10 years straight, although he has not been convicted of any offense warranting a 10-year sentence. As difficult as that may be to believe, he has not been convicted of any offense warranting a 10-year sentence. He is being held nearly incognito, where even his lawyer is unable to get free access with reasonable notice to Reverend Victor. And this is the situation that we have presented to the Special Rapporteur that we need you all to be aware about, because in the context of this, he's suffering, he's ill, he's being mistreated, and he very well can find himself dead. He could literally experience an unnatural death while in the custody of the state of Louisiana. Ms. Belinda, you're muted.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much, Dr. Zena. This is so important right now that, I just want to say in Reverend Victor's own words that he believes that without a doubt that he has been kidnapped, and because of that, he's fighting for his life. And this is a public outcry for him, because we know without a doubt that we have tried everything within our power to get the people that that's holding him to cooperate with us, to help, by all, any kind of way we can, to get them to release him. We have been in and out the courts, filing, habeas, filing motions, filing writs, to get them to cooperate with the law here in Louisiana in regards to them holding him, with no reveal whatsoever, and just a outright blatant disregard, to the fact where I almost broke down and pleaded with the judge to just give us an opportunity to set a hearing so that we can bring forth all the evidence and proof. And the judge refused to set that hearing. So, with that said, I want to say that the only reason why I believe that Pastor Victor is in prison right now is because he's a Black man, sad to say, and that he was a very prominent multi-millionaire. And before the death of his son, which was a horrific tragedy, that they have turned it into a total nightmare for Pastor Victor, his wife, and his entire family. This man never even had a traffic ticket. So for them to paint him as a monster and just totally destroy his life and his family, even after they did not have any evidence whatsoever that the child had been beat to death. And when the child died in the hospital, they did not even have a determination of death, a cause of death. But they arrested Pastor Victor right there that day at the hospital before they can even determine what the child had died from.
Yes. You know, and Ms. Belinda, if I can really emphasize, is that these type of irregularities are what we have presented to the UN Special Rapporteur. You know, in the United States, we whether you have a case, whether it's in family court, whether it's in criminal court, you can go to the courts of your state. It may be federal court, and you can present your evidence, and you can make your motions, and you can try to argue for your rights in hopes of prevailing. Um, However, that when the system is unresponsive and you have evidence that it is, the concept is called being weaponized against um, an American citizen. That is when the legal system, the courts, the prosecutor's office, the police are using their power, operating under color of law and using their power to accomplish a goal other than appropriate law enforcement, then that's when we need to be able to go outside of the United States and present to bodies such as the United Nations the question of whether in fact we are being persecuted and it persecuted, just like where we hear those type of terms with regard to people who live in other countries under brutal dictators, authoritarian countries. But in this country, when you have the evidence such as what Ms. Belinda talked about, the fact that they arrested Reverend Victor before they even had a cause of death with regard to his son. They began to seize his substantial assets. This is the next day,
Mhm. You
you
know,
know, the next day after he was arrested. These are the type of considerations that we presented to the special rapporteur. We haven't simply just made an emotional plea and presented our interpretation of the evidence, despite the fact that a jury has a less than unanimous jury determined to convict Reverend Victor. And the last thing I want to emphasize, and then I know I cut you off, Ms.
that's
Belinda,
okay.
is that for we made this point to the special rapporteur, for anyone who wants to think that perhaps there are people who just in good faith believe that Reverend Victor is guilty of this horrendous crime that he had been charged with. Keep in mind that that conviction has been overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. That happened in April of last year, and they still have not allowed Reverend Victor to be released. But keep in mind that Reverend Victor participated in this trial. He's being accused of second-degree murder through the abuse of a child. He was not represented by an attorney. He represented himself, and they still could not get a jury to convict him.
Mm,
There were not,
absolutely.
there were three people. It was a 12-man jury, and three were not convinced initially that Reverend Victor was innocent, and he didn't even have a lawyer representing him. He's up against multiple state prosecutors, and they still couldn't get 12 people convinced that he was guilty of a crime. And then Ms. Belinda can talk about the fact that the jury was sent back, and the judge insisted that they deliberate further. And even after that, they could not get those 12 people to vote to convict. Now, we didn't mention that the case had been presented to a judge back in 2010.
Right. Hmm.
And that judge, that's a Louisiana state judge, threw the case out.
Hmm.
I've been told
After,
that she said, come back when you have evidence of a murder. There's no murder here. So we
right.
got a sitting state court judge. We got up to 3 members of a duly constituted jury. And then the case went in 2020, last year, to the U.S. Supreme Court. And every U.S. Supreme Court that made a determination to vacate the conviction. It was on a technicality. They determined it was unconstitutional to convict with less than a unanimous jury verdict. Only one, Justice Clarence Thomas, indicated that he would not have taken the case. So the point is, you got multiple judges, justices, and private citizens who are looking more extensively detailed at the facts of this case, and they're determining that either Reverend Victor is not guilty as a matter of fact, or exonerating him as a matter of law. So this notion that somehow we just have, perhaps, we're just subjective and we just have an emotional opinion that Reverend Victor is innocent. You need to understand that this is an opinion that's been held on multiple occasions by people in the positions to know the facts. I'm sorry for interrupting you, Ms. Belinda.
Yeah, and I really want to make the point that the judge, and I really want people to hear this carefully, the judge that convicted Reverend Victor and gave him life in Angola in prison was the wife of his #1 competitor. That judge insisted and literally, hit the gavel and said for the jury to go back in and come back out with a verdict. I saw this with my own eyes. So anywhere else in America, that would have been a hung jury and Pastor Victor would have been free to go, but not on her watch. So I want to, when you witness these type of things, where do you turn? And when Pastor Victor was fighting in this courtroom for his life, for his wife, for his children, for all of his possession, it was real. And when the first judge said that, come back when you have a homicide, when they charged him with first-degree murder, there was no way, no evidence, no proof whatsoever that there had been a murder. So by that time, Pastor Victor had went through several court appearances. They had already taken all of his possessions, adopted his kids off, buried his son, and he to this day, he still don't know where his son is buried at. So him and his wife were free, but they had taken everything away from them. So Pastor Victor files a 1983 civil action against everyone. And when I say everyone, he sued the hospital, he sued the doctors, he sued the Child Protective Services, he sued the state of Louisiana, everyone, for $100 million. We have that lawsuit. And when when him and his wife was told that they were going to be recharged with second-degree murder, they can take the lawsuit off the table and walk away. But if they didn't take it off the table, they would spend the rest of their life in Angola. That's what Pastor Victor was told in his own words.
And this is what we've got to have public outcry. We can't not on our watch. We can't just, nod, shake our heads, shrug our shoulders. Not on this one. We're gonna
No, I
have.
would like to say
Mhm.
also, Dr. Zena, before we have JL come in,
Thank you.
but it's so important that, when Pastor Victor was arrested at the hospital, the very next day, they pulled for all of his business contracts, all of his money out the bank, cash money out the bank. And mind me, this man had relationships with 18 of the New Orleans Saints players that was in contract agreements that they were going to build $1 million homes in this corridor. They was going to build a shopping center. They was going to bring jobs to a dilapidated Black community, and that they was going to thrive and build that community up and bring, it was a corridor right outside of New Orleans that was going to be very prosperous for the people that lived there. But it would take away from the judge's husband, that was his #1 competitor, that developed the other side of the levee, where it was more prominent white community. So they wanted Pastor Victor gone. And they used his tragedy, the death of his child, that the first forensic pathologist determined that the child died from asthma. That's the reason why the first judge quashed the case, because there was an autopsy and a pathologist, a forensic pathology that came in and said that the child died from asthma, which is that community that he lived in have been named the Death Alley for poison chemicals in the air that a lot of children and citizens have suffered from these type of illness, asthma, and all type of disabilities because of the poison chemicals in the air. St. John the Baptist Parish, Reserve, Louisiana. You can Google it. Thank you.
So if
Go
we
ahead.
can go ahead and have Mr. J.L. Lazoo, who is the campaign spokesperson for Reverend Victor. This is a groundbreaking development. The filing, the outreach to the UN Special Rapporteur on torture, with the proposal that an American citizen, and specifically Reverend Errol Victor Sr., is a U.S. political prisoner. And Reverend Victor is doing that not only with regard to his personal concerns, but as a candidate for Congress, and as an expression of concern about the rights of American citizens in this country. Can you elaborate on that aspect of things, Mr. Lazoo?
Yes, sure. Well, thank you for having me in this panel today. This is truly an atrocious type of story. Though many times I hear that story, it doesn't change the impact that it causes, because it's that impactful. And I did want to mention that, this is America, and the situation that Pastor Victor finds himself is unique to him as a person and his race. And it's unfortunate, because if we were having this discussion today, like we're experiencing with Dr. Victor, or Pastor Victor, and if it included someone like, let's say, Hunter Biden, the son of Joe Biden, no way in this country with Joe Biden's son go through what Pastor Victor is going through today. And that same privilege goes to almost all white people in this country. And it's critical that we have to get a real clarification as to how what he's going through is just as easily possible that can occur to almost any Black person in this country with no fault at all. And because of that, we have to continue to fight. I'm proud that Louisiana United International is really leading this movement, because it's about time that our people get to hear and see what's going on, and now have the opportunity to take it to the international stage, where now your voices go beyond the United States of America. And it's critical that we support this, because Pastor Victor is also running for office from jail because of what's being done to him. And it's all being done unlawful and illegally. And that brings up the next question, which is, where is the support from his political party, the party that we as a people support? Is the Democratic Party supporting Pastor Victor, or the Republican Party? Are they taking a position to go on his side and proclaim that he's an actual innocent man being held unlawfully? So when we look at the politics behind this, it brings a little bit more light as to how he got where he is today. The politics has played a major role in impacting our people, how we're being treated, and also what treatment they put upon us. Just as we learned how these judges have taken actions against Mr. Victor over personal reasons, which is supposed to be an unlawful act. But yet this is exactly what's taking place. Between the politics and the over or excess use of the law by these judges and others within the court system has created a great travesty. And that's why Pastor Victor, in his particular situation, is actually the most capable person and actually most qualified to represent District 5 in Louisiana, that congressional seat. So he can bring that voice to Washington, and he can help create legislation, and most importantly, make reform, create reform that's badly needed. And this is why Pastor Victor needs to be elected this March. And we ask that each of you who are listening today get involved in the campaign. Go to his website, support his campaign, become a volunteer, connect with Louisiana United International, and let's get this message across the state of Louisiana and throughout the country that what's taking place with Pastor Victor will be something that we're going to solve. We're going to solve this problem, a problem that he should not have gone through this, him, his family, his wife, and any of our people. And we play a big role, even though we're not going through what he's going through personally, but we can support him and get him out of his condition and free him and others just like him in this country. And all it takes is for us to go to his website, support him, go to the ballot if you live in this district, and vote on March 20th. So for him to get elected. And let your friends and family know about what's taking place. But your activity is really critical. It's critical for us to succeed, because Pastor Victor represents all of us. And it's up to us to support him. And I'm so glad that we're having this opportunity to talk about this. But most importantly, I'm even far more motivated of the fact that more of us are getting together and understanding how bad this problem is and how important that we get involved in this, because it is our actions that's going to make the difference. Our personal actions will make all the difference with Pastor Victor and all of our people that are facing horrible, horrible experiences like him. I yield to you.
Yes, well, we have about 15 minutes. We're going to open the floor for question and answers, questions from the audience, any members of the media. We have one question that has been presented to us, which I'll share. And even if you have just areas that you would like for more additional information on, because Ms. Belinda can elaborate, extensively with regard to the circumstances of Reverend Victor's case. I know there's so much more I can say about the UN Special Rapporteur complaint process that we're using. In fact, the first question is, what can be expected from the UN when they answer the report? So let me take a shot at that. What happens is that our complaint is submitted to the Special Rapporteur, and we've asked for an urgent appeal. So again, the Special Rapporteur is not law enforcement. He will write the United States, whatever the representative that they work with. It may be someone in the State Department, I believe is who the rapporteur will reach out to, and make them aware of the information that we have provided, and the risk of death that's presented by Reverend Victor. And he will encourage the United States to look into the matter and to ensure that Reverend Victor is not being subjected to physical or psychological torture. Now, there's no strict 48-hour requirement. It's just simply considered an urgent. We've asked that he act urgently, and of course, it's within his discretion as to whether he responds or not. And this special procedure is notorious to have a lot. We have to realize that we are competing with people who are being oppressed and having their rights violated and being subjected to torture. We are competing with people around the world. But what makes us hopeful that Professor Meltzer will latch on to Reverend Victor's circumstances is because he has been very vocal in criticizing the risk of political prosecutions in the United States. He's been very vocal with regard to that, and the fact that the United States does not necessarily provide fair and impartial trials when you have highly controversial criminal cases. And so we are hoping that he will see that this is exactly what's happening, Reverend Victor, and he will put our complaint on the top of most likely a very large stack of complaints from people coming around the world. And through formal procedures and also diplomatic outreach and perhaps even public statements, join us and become just as much of an advocate for Reverend Victor as the three of us who are part of this press conference. Okay, now we got another. Okay, so I think that we got that question.
Dr. Z, that, it's so important that people understand that, Reverend Victor's case, and while I'm telling you, when you look at the atrocity that took place in this case and how all of the evidence is so blatant in your face, that when we say that, he have beat them, several times. The first judge said that there was no murder. There's no proof of evidence of a murder took place. You know, and then when we look at the fact that, you know, how all the tentacles connect, you know, the judge, the DA, the attorney, you know, the prosecutor, the detectives, you know, all of the political strings, the community, you know, why could nobody see through, you know, the evidence, plain evidence that showed that this child was not beat to death? You
And we
know,
have a, I'm sorry.
okay, go ahead.
And we got a question from the audience along the lines. You propose why, and we've got sort of like a how question from the audience. If the United States Supreme Court vacated Mr. Victor's case, how is it that a lower court can bind him without charge? Now, you know that question. Do you want to answer that Miss Belinda? You've been dealing with that whole bail, you
Mhm.
know, that bail smoke screen that they've been presenting.
Absolutely. You know, when the United States Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, you know, ruled that what Louisiana had done here was unconstitutional. And that was it was a racist, schemed up, you know, plot. It was just a trap. And that, so Ramos versus Louisiana sued the state of Louisiana, and every single, and he and beat them bad, beat them real bad with the lawsuit that the non-unanimous jury verdict was unconstitutional. And what happened is that every single person that was on direct appeal, because Pastor Victor fought to keep himself on direct appeal, he was fighting for his life with motions in and out the court, that if you were on direct appeal, you would get your conviction, you know, vacated, and that you would no longer be convicted of anything. So at that particular time, he was in the Department of Corrections custody, which was Angola. So now, since your conviction has been vacated, you're no longer DOC, so they have to release you. So when it came time for them to release Pastor Victor, we literally had to file a motion to the court, you know, back and forth, in and out, you know, to get them to follow, to obey what the United States Supreme Court had done. So that was a fight. Eventually, his attorney won that fight, and they had to let Pastor Victor out of Angola. So that day when they came to release him, they gave him civilian clothes, they gave him an ID, they gave him a list, all the things that you're entitled to when you've been released as a citizen from prison. I mean, back into society, okay? But instead of them doing that, they snatched Pastor Victor up, put him in the back of a sheriff patrol car, and took him and landed him back in St. John the Baptist Parish Hellhole Jail with no reason. And we still don't know the reason why they did that.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, Miss Belinda, what I've heard one of the assistant prosecutors explain is that they say that he had a bail violation because he didn't initially appear for his second trial. And then that scandalous America's Most Wanted that depicted him as beating his stepson for hours at a time and eventually killing him. And so what we have brought out is, number one, it was Reverend Victor's opinion, and the face of the law seemed to support him, that he was not obliged to appear before the trial court for the charges of second degree murder, because the case had been thrown out by the first trial judge. And the second, he had a good argument that the second judge and the second charge, they had no jurisdiction. And even if you believe, if even in the Louisiana courts, they came through this tortured legal decision that I mean, they just strained the law. They had to bend over backwards to try to interpret the law that suggests that Reverend Victor was wrong in his opinion, that he was not obliged to appear before the second court. And so they took the position that he had violated bail and he was, a flight risk. And so what his lawyer has argued, and Ms. Belinda has emphasized, that even if you want to conclude that he has a bail violation, what is the punishment for that? 2 years incarceration? He's been in prison at this point for nearly 10 years. And see, Professor Meltzer has dealt with the exact same issue. And we point that out in our press release with regard to WikiLeaks co-founder Julian Assange, because they have kept him incarcerated without any conviction. He's not been convicted of anything. And they say, well, they're a flight risk because, and what is Professor Meltzer, who has been going around the world emphasizing that Assange, whatever you think of him, he did not violate bail. He sought asylum. He exercised what he thought was a legal option. Same thing with regard to Reverend Victor. And so they've acted like somehow they've got to keep him incarcerated at all costs, no matter the circumstances. And that's just not the way things go in the United States.
Absolutely. And this man's family is trapped inside of a nightmare, because we know, I was there, and I know for a fact that it's Pastor Victor is better off dead to the state of Louisiana because of what they did. What they did to him was wrong. They got it wrong, people. They got it wrong. They manufactured the whole case against him. And because he sued them, they tore this man's house down that appraised at the time for $850,000. They shoved his house down to a concrete slab, and he had not been convicted of anything. They adopted all of his kids off, put his kids, buried his son. They did all of this, took all of his money, all of his possessions, his business. They shut everything down before he was convicted of anything.
Before he was convicted.
So they got it wrong. And they know when they snatched him up after he left Angola, they kidnapped him. That's what, in his own words, he said, I'm being kidnapped. They holding me hostage because they know they got it wrong.
Exactly. Ms. Belinda, we've got a question, and people want, our audience member wants to know if this is something that the governor can correct, perhaps through issuing a pardon or commuting the sentence. And Mr. Lazou, do you want to try to answer that question? Are you familiar
Sure.
with the limits of pardons and getting your sentence commuted? Go ahead.
Yeah, he definitely can if he's actually held for a crime.
Exactly. Exactly. There you
So
go.
that's the conundrum that we're in.
Exactly. And then yes, you have to have committed a crime. He's not convicted of anything. And at most you've got this supposedly bail violation, which even if you agreed he was guilty of that, the sentence is like, matter of months, no more than a couple of years from my understanding, in jail, not even in prison. Okay, we have a question. How can the Department of Correction take him back? It's so wonderful. We've got an astute audience here. They're picking up on the problems. How can the Department of Corrections take him back as a DOC inmate if he was released from them and not taking him into custody as a local St. John Baptist Parish custody, but placed in isolation? And do he have a lawyer? Okay, they're seeing the problem. He is not a property of the Department of Correction. He has not been convicted of anything. And he has a lawyer, but his lawyer can't get access to him. Do you want to elaborate that? We got only like a few more minutes to go.
Right, right. And this is so important. I'm glad that they're seeing this. And this is the reason why Pastor Victor, in his own words, he knows for a fact that he's being held hostage. And the reason why, people, listen to me. If you can manufacture a crime against someone, and this is what's happening, and you get it wrong, Pastor Victor is entitled to liberation, reparation, every single thing they have done to him. And they know if they let him go, somebody is going to be responsible for this. And they don't intend to let him go. So yes, he do have a lawyer. He have had several lawyers. And when they was trying to badger him and threaten him to take a plea, he refused to take a plea because he's innocent. And well, you better plead to something. This is what they told him. You better plead to something. If not, they're going to get you. That's what his lawyers, his paid lawyers, was telling him to do. Plead to something. And he said, no way. So listen, people, this is serious. This is not just about Pastor Victor either. I want to make that clear, because we're advocates on behalf of thousands of people that have been trapped in a system because they pleaded to something that they didn't do just to get it over with. So what we're saying is that, where do you turn when you got the system that have the fix is in? The judge, the DA, the sheriff, the lawyer, the public defenders, all of these people are working against you. The police, all of them, the investigators, the detectives.
Miss Belinda, we've got the similar. You are asking the question that another audience member is picking up on, and we'll go a little while longer so we can make sure we get all the questions and answered. But the question of the audience member is asking, can you file charges against the prosecutor and the judge and the competitors? Can you just file charges? And that's what we really need to try to make clear, that these reaching out to those various U.S. legal agencies have proven useless. And when I work a lot with the United Nations, and they in 2018 they made a determination that when you are alleging the type of collusion that Ms. Belinda is talking about, the reaching out to the United States legal system and disciplinary agencies and filing lawsuits are ineffective. And it's not that no one ever wins, but it takes too long. A lot of people don't live long enough. And the last thing I want to emphasize is, I don't want anybody to think that going to the United Nations is somehow some type of magic remedy. Number one, the United States have put so many limits on the ability of American citizens to go outside of the United States to seek help, even when we are being persecuted, literally tortured, literally held hostage by rogue agents of our own government. The United States has various treaties, human rights treaties, where they claim that they will protect us. That is the fundamental job of a government, is to protect its citizens. And we can't even be protected by people who work for our government, because our legal systems and these disciplinary agencies and these complaints, they're this is not emotional. Nearly 100% of the time, 100% of the time, those complaints are rejected, are deemed by the reviewing courts and administrative agencies as without merit. And that's even when the FBI asked them to get involved. The Department of Justice, nearly 100% of the time, will refuse to get involved. And what are our options? The special rapporteurs actually have very limited power. Well, whatever opinion that they have about a situation is very influential, very influential. So we very much want Professor Meltzer to join with us in advocating for Reverend Victor, but he can't force the United States to do anything. The UN Human Rights Council actually has more power than the special rapporteur, but guess what? The U.S. Congress has arranged that we cannot go to the UN Human Rights Council when we are being persecuted in this country unless we are alleging that there are a gross number of people involved. And they don't tell you exactly what the number is, but it has to be a lot of people. You got to show a large impact. And while, you know, there are undoubtedly many people who qualify as political prisoners in this country, you know, the law suggests that we cannot establish there's a gross number of people who are similarly situated to Reverend Victor, because in a country of 300 million people, you know, even if we were able to establish that 100,000 people when his circumstances, that may not be enough. Now, there's another thing I want you all to understand, and then I'll shut up. There's an even more powerful agency than the council, the UN Human Rights Committee.
Mm-hmm.
And the UN Human Rights Committee, you don't have to prove that a lot of people are affected. You can just you could just prove that you are having your rights violated, you are being wrongfully detained, you are being tortured. But guess what? When the United States agreed to the human rights treaties, they put in a stipulation that no American citizen can enforce that treaty before a U.S. court or before the UN Human Rights Committee. The most we can do is if we can prove that the violation has a gross impact, then we can go to the council, but they will not let us go with regard to one person. The only time we can do that is go to the special rapporteur, which we have done. And we need to understand that basically when it comes to alleging that the United States is not protecting our rights, we as American citizens are stuck. We are isolated. We are cut off from the rest of the international human rights community because of stipulations that the U.S. Congress has put on these treaties. They barely worth the paper that they're written on insofar as their ability to actually protect our rights, and that has to stop. We've got to demand something different.
Right, and that's the reason why we're saying that it's going to take, you know, everyone. It's going to take God and everyone helping us with this, because what's happening here is wrong. This is wrong, you know, and Louisiana is first in this curse, because what they did here, and I want people to understand, this is not just happening to Reverend Victor.
Yes.
But because all the evidence is there, you know, I was there, I witnessed 10 days in his trial, how, you know, this whole thing transpired. And that the issue of the non-unanimous jury is about people in their own official capacity that manufactured this conviction against him, this wrongful conviction. You know, and they specifically have been targeting African-American males. So this is a human rights violation. And we want everybody to understand that what happened to Reverend Victor and many, many others can happen to anyone.
Exactly.
You know, when Ramus sued the state of Louisiana, and Louisiana lost, in the highest court in the land, the United States Supreme Court ruled what these people done here in Louisiana was unconstitutional. You know, so Louisiana was caught dead in the wrong. They have been caught dead in the wrong. And they're telling the United States Supreme Court to go to you know where.
Miss
So,
Belinda, we have
I gotta say this, Dr. Z.
Mhm.
You know, I want the people to know is that we can't just think that, you know, we're just gonna take whatever, you know, they say to us and have us, oh, they can't do that. Well, look what they doing. We can't do that anymore. I am very concerned. I know that Pastor Victor is worth more dead than alive to them right now because they got it wrong with him. Go ahead, Dr. Z.
I just wanted to point out that
I wanted to say that they're covering up. They're covering it up. The cover up is serious. The cover up is serious because we need the light to shine on all of this darkness. It's a curse.
One audience member asked the question, would you say that the law practice in Louisiana is that of a third country? And, you know, I want to point out that third world countries, even historically authoritarian countries like China, you know, countries where, you know, the legal system are dominated by a brutal, corrupt president, they have more rights than we have as American citizens. They could take their case to the UN Human Rights Committee and get a ruling, because right now all the special rapporteur can do is encourage the United States to protect Reverend Victor, which is very important. And he because he will have to premise that his message on a determination that Reverend Victor is a political prisoner. He can't make his recommendation on the grounds that Reverend Victor is an innocent person, because that's not his job to decide guilt or innocence. So he will have to acknowledge, I believe for the first time in history, that there is at least one political prisoner in the United States, and that's what's historical. But if Reverend Victor was a citizen of China, a citizen of Russia, he would have more options. And we could go to the UN Human Rights Committee and they could open up a full-fledged investigation of the United States and whether their system is effective in protecting the rights of American citizens from persecution, from prosecution on the grounds of our ideas, on the grounds of who we are, and it's part of what we call this economic sabotage that they subjected Reverend Victor to, is really financial terrorism. And if you don't take anything away from this press conference but this, they have tried to prosecute Reverend Victor multiple times. They have failed twice. They have an incentive. It will be much easier to let him die in state custody than to try to go back and cover up all this irregularities and try to convict him again, now that thanks to Miss Belinda and Louisiana United International, the world is watching. So we've got to, we've got to keep the fire hot so that they have an incentive to keep this man alive, free him, and then we can go forward and establish his innocence once and for all.
And the Dr. Z, actually, they got it wrong. They got it, he beat them 3 times, and if anybody have any questions, he beat them 3 times, because when the United States Supreme Court ruled that, overturned, threw it out, his conviction out, then that was the final straw. But what I really want people to take away from this press conference before, if there are any more questions, because then we want to give our final closing comments of what there's some actions that people can do to help us now.
Can you move towards that, Miss Belinda? Because we pretty much got everything answered.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, what I want you to take away from this press conference, knowing today that these, this is a human rights issue, and that, criminal acts of people in their own official capacity, powerful people, judges that are drunk on power, politicians, it's all of this is connected. Okay. And that's the only reason why, when I say that they're doing this in their own official capacity and willingly and wrong, and they're willingly doing what they're doing to him because they don't want to admit the fact that they got it wrong. Okay. And that, I want you to also take away from this, that this is slavery in its highest form. Pastor Victor, in his own words, he said that, he have been made a slave because they manufactured this wrongful conviction against him. And he also says that, that we're in a moment right now. This is a historic moment, because he have filed another lawsuit that we were successful in raising the money. And you can go, it's a civil action, it's 20-3432 section J, number 3. That's in the United States District Court in Louisiana, the Eastern District Court. And that's 20-3432 section J, number 3. Now, the reason why he filed this is because he's saying that this is slavery. It's slavery. And it's time for people to be liberated and receive the reparation that they deserve, because Louisiana is first in this curse. They was known as having more people incarcerated than anywhere else in the world. And this lawsuit tells us why and how they did it. Thank you.
We've got a request that we end in the last 3 minutes. Mr. Lazou, reiterate to us why we need Reverend Victor to win, not only to prevail before the special rapporteur, but also to win his campaign for Congress.
Absolutely. A vote for Pastor Victor is a vote for victory and freedom for him and for all of us. So we don't have to repeat the same atrocity over and over again. There are many people out there that need this, and this is such a high crime against our people that we have to bring it to the national scale. And Pastor Victor will be the most motivated and dedicated person as a congressman in Washington to make the reform from Washington. So that's what's important, that we support it. And there was a question about a phone banking. Yes, go to the website to Pastor Victor, sign up as a volunteer. We definitely have you as a assist in phone banking to promote this. Thank you.
Ms. Belinda, now my heart is heavy. That's what you usually say, but I just want everyone to know that Reverend Victor's mother is listening, and she wants to know, where is the local news who bombarded him with this wrong? And we do have members of the media in our audience, but can you speak to Reverend Victor's mother?
When you say, where is the local news? And when I say, when the fix is in, the fix is in. In that first lawsuit that Pastor Victor filed, he sued the news. He sued all the local news media that painted him to be a monster. You're his mom. I have met you in person. I have cried with you. I know that your son is brilliant. He scored a 35 on his SAT test. I mean, he's one of the most brilliant person that I have ever met. And I know that the news out there in St. John the Baptist Parish in reserves are all politically connected. And I feel as though it's across the whole state of Louisiana. They don't intend to tell the truth about what really happened. They haven't came and interviewed you so that you can tell them about your son. So we are using our social media outlets here today. to tell the world about your son and his story and who he really is. And like JL just said, he is the best person for us to go to Washington, D.C. and speak for us about these atrocities that have taken place here in the state of Louisiana. He will tell the people that slavery is alive and well in Louisiana. He will tell them that it have never stopped. So that's the person that we need. And we're going to use every media that would cooperate with us to tell Pastor Victor's story. We will not be silent. The world needs to know, especially about the state of Louisiana and what they have done to him and many, many others. Thank you.
Mrs. Victor, she's 87 years old and she can't find out how Reverend Victor is doing or any information about him. He's literally held hostage. He's incognito. I mean, you know, and we even have one audience member saying that part of the incentive for not bringing him back to St. John Parish is because he's so well known there, and that will make it more difficult for things to you know, to happen to him. So it's 1:47, and if there's no other, I don't think we have. Okay, and there's someone wants to correct that you had mentioned he had filed a lawsuit for $100 million, and that's what I thought. One audience member is correcting us. It was actually for $500 million. So we're gonna get Reverend Victor the relief. No, you know, this harm, a lot of it is just irreparable harm, but we're gonna fight. Well, we need you all to fight with us, because even at the United Nations, they again, we're competing with people around the world who are experiencing atrocities, people having whole families killed, is disappearing in the night. And we've got to show them that we as Americans are willing to stand up with them if they will support us. So Ms. Belinda, do you want to close out?
No, I know that some of his children are also out there watching, that we love you all, that we're, you know, this is a moment, this is a historic moment for us, that we're not going to give up, we're not going to quit, and we're determined to bring him home safe and sound. Thank you so much.
Yes, and Mr. Lazou, we got one final question. People want to know clearly what district that Reverend Victor is running in.
Sure. He is in District number 5, which includes the area of Monroe all the way through Alexandria. And that you can participate there. And I'd like to take this moment also to recognize the family. I never got a chance to meet his mother or his family. So I hope this is a way of saying hello. And we are here fighting on behalf of Pastor Victor. Thank you.
And she extends her thanks through the chat to everyone who's supporting Reverend Victor. And we will close on that. Thank you so much, everyone who has attended this press conference. It's available online now on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll have our own edited version of it available real soon. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
And tell everyone to support Pastor Victor campaign. Thank you so much.
Victory with Victor.
Victory with Victor. Can't be no better than that.
No. Take care.
We got the victory.
Exactly. You be the victor. Vote
Right.
for Reverend Victor.
Vote for Reverend Victor.